The 20th century, a time of incredible progress. Yet it was also an era marked by two devastating global conflicts, World War I and World War II. These wars were unlike anything seen before. Millions perished, entire continents were ravaged. The very foundations of civilization seemed to crumble. These conflicts were not isolated events, they were deeply interconnected. The Treaty of Versailles, meant to end World War I, sowed the seeds for the next global conflict. Understanding the causes and consequences of these wars is crucial to understanding our world today. The world wars were a stark reminder of humanity's capacity for both destruction and resilience. From the ashes of these conflicts arose a new world order, forever shaped by the sacrifices and lessons of the past. The First World War, originally called the Great War, erupted in 1914. Europe at the time was a tangle of alliances. These alliances, meant to prevent war, actually helped to ignite it. Nationalism was at its peak. Countries believed in their own superiority, creating an atmosphere of distrust and competition. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary triggered the war. Austria-Hungary, backed by Germany, declared war on Serbia. Serbia was allied with Russia. This set off a chain reaction. One by one, nations across Europe were pulled into the conflict. The world watched in disbelief as Europe, a beacon of civilization, descended into chaos. What began as a regional conflict quickly escalated into a global war, forever changing the course of history. World War I was characterized by trench warfare. On the Western Front, a network of trenches stretched for hundreds of miles. Life in the trenches was horrific. Soldiers endured constant shelling, disease, and the ever-present threat of death. New technologies emerged, making the war even more deadly. Machine guns, poison gas, and tanks revolutionized warfare, leading to unprecedented casualties. Some battles, like the Battle of the Somme, resulted in hundreds of thousands of casualties for mere miles of gained or lost territory. After 4 long years of fighting, the war finally ended in 1918 with the Treaty of Versailles. Germany, blamed for the war, was severely punished. The treaty imposed harsh reparations and territorial losses, creating resentment and instability that would have lasting consequences. The First World War left an indelible mark on the world. Millions lay dead, empires crumbled, the global economy was in ruins. The war also led to the creation of new nations, as empires dissolved and borders were redrawn. The Spanish flu, a devastating pandemic, swept across the globe in the war's aftermath, further adding to the devastation. This pandemic highlighted the interconnectedness of the world and the devastating consequences of global conflict. The world yearned for peace, but the Treaty of Versailles, rather than healing old wounds, had sown the seeds for new conflicts. The stage was set for another, even more devastating global war. Section 5. Gathering Storm, the Road to Another World War. The aftermath of World War I saw the rise of totalitarian regimes in Germany, Italy, and Japan. These nations, each with their own unique blend of authoritarianism, began to challenge the fragile peace established by the Treaty of Versailles. These regimes, fueled by nationalism and a thirst for power, exploited the economic turmoil and political instability of the interwar years. The Great Depression had left millions unemployed and desperate, creating a fertile ground for radical ideologies to take root. The Treaty of Versailles, with its harsh penalties on Germany, bred resentment and instability. The German people, humiliated and economically crippled, were eager for a leader who promised to restore their nation's former glory. The Great Depression further exacerbated these problems, creating fertile ground for extremist ideologies to take root. In Italy, Benito Mussolini capitalized on the chaos, establishing a fascist regime that promised to revive the Roman Empire's grandeur. In Germany, Adolf Hitler and his Nazi party rose to power, promising to restore German glory and overturn the Treaty of Versailles. Hitler's charismatic oratory and propaganda machine convinced many that he was the savior Germany needed. The world watched with growing apprehension as Hitler rebuilt Germany's military, in open defiance of the treaty. His aggressive expansionist policies, including the annexation of Austria and the Sudetenland, signaled a clear threat to European stability. The stage was set for another global conflict, one that would prove even more devastating than the last. As alliances formed and tensions escalated, the world braced itself for the inevitable clash that would reshape the course of history. Section 6. Total War, a World Ablaze. World War II began in 1939 when Germany, under Hitler's command, invaded Poland. This invasion was not just a simple act of aggression but a calculated move that had been planned meticulously. Hitler's ambitions were clear: to expand German territory and establish dominance over Europe. The invasion of Poland was swift and brutal, showcasing the might of the German military and the effectiveness of their blitzkrieg tactics. This act of aggression triggered a cascade of alliances, plunging the world into another global conflict. Countries were quick to respond, with Britain and France declaring war on Germany just days after the invasion. The world was once again divided into two major factions: the Allies and the Axis powers. The alliances formed were not just military but also political, with countries pledging full support to their allies. The Second World War was truly a global war, with fighting taking place across Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Pacific. No continent was spared from the ravages of war. In Europe, battles raged from the Western Front to the Eastern Front. In Asia, the conflict spread from China to the islands of the Pacific. Africa saw its own share of battles, with the North African campaign being a significant theater of war. The sheer scale of the conflict was unprecedented, with millions of soldiers and civilians caught in the crossfire. The war saw the rise of new technologies and tactics, including blitzkrieg warfare, strategic bombing, and, ultimately, the atomic bomb. Blitzkrieg, or lightning war, was a tactic that involved quick, coordinated attacks using infantry, tanks, and air support. This tactic allowed Germany to conquer vast territories in a short amount of time. Strategic bombing campaigns targeted industrial and civilian centers, aiming to cripple the enemy's war effort and morale. The development and use of the atomic bomb marked a significant turning point in warfare, introducing a weapon of mass destruction that had the power to annihilate entire cities. Civilians were increasingly targeted, resulting in an unprecedented loss of life. The war brought about immense suffering for those not directly involved in the fighting. Cities were bombed into ruins, and countless families were displaced, becoming refugees in their own countries. The civilian casualties were staggering, with millions losing their lives due to bombings, massacres, and the harsh conditions of war. The impact on the civilian population was one of the most tragic aspects of the conflict. Key events of the war included the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, the Battle of Stalingrad, and the D-Day landings in Normandy. The attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941 brought the United States into the war, marking a significant shift in the balance of power. The Battle of Stalingrad was one of the deadliest battles in history, with the Soviet Union ultimately emerging victorious and turning the tide against Germany. The D-Day landings in 1944 were a massive Allied operation that marked the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. The D-Day landings in Normandy were a pivotal moment in the war. On June 6, 1944, Allied forces launched a massive amphibious invasion on the beaches of Normandy, France. This operation, known as Operation Overlord, involved thousands of troops, ships, and aircraft. The successful landings established a crucial foothold in Europe, allowing the Allies to push further into German-occupied territory, and the dropping of atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In August 1945, the United States dropped atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The devastation was immense, with both cities being almost completely destroyed and tens of thousands of people killed instantly. The use of atomic bombs brought about the end of the war in the Pacific, as Japan surrendered shortly after the bombings. Each of these events marked a turning point in the war, ultimately leading to the defeat of the Axis powers. The surrender of Germany in May 1945 and Japan in September 1945 brought an end to the most destructive conflict in human history. The world was left to grapple with the aftermath, as countries began the long process of rebuilding and healing from the scars of war. The victory celebrations were tempered by the immense loss and devastation that had been experienced, but they also marked the beginning of a new era of hope and reconstruction. Section 7. A New World Order, Reshaping the Globe. The world was on the brink of monumental change as leaders gathered to discuss the future. The Yalta Conference, held in February 1945, was a pivotal moment where the Allied leaders, Winston Churchill, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and Joseph Stalin, met to shape the post-war world. The Second World War ended in 1945 with the surrender of Japan following the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. These bombings not only marked the end of the war but also showcased the devastating power of nuclear weapons, forever altering the nature of warfare and international relations. The world, exhausted and reeling from the war's devastation, was forever changed. Cities lay in ruins, economies were shattered, and millions of lives had been lost. The task of rebuilding was immense, and the collective trauma of the war left deep scars on the global psyche. The war had a profound impact on global politics, leading to the emergence of the United States and the Soviet Union as superpowers. These two nations, with their contrasting ideologies, would dominate the global stage, setting the tone for international relations in the coming decades. A new world order, characterized by the Cold War, emerged. This period was marked by intense rivalry and competition between the capitalist West, led by the United States, and the communist East, led by the Soviet Union. The construction of the Berlin Wall symbolized the deep divisions that had formed. This ideological conflict between the capitalist West and the communist East would shape global politics for decades to come. Propaganda, espionage, and proxy wars became the tools of this new kind of warfare, as both sides sought to expand their influence and prevent the other from gaining the upper hand. The United Nations was formed in the aftermath of the war, with the goal of preventing future conflicts and promoting international cooperation. The signing of the UN Charter in San Francisco in 1945 was a hopeful moment, as nations came together to create an organization dedicated to peace and security. The world, scarred by two devastating wars, hoped to forge a new path based on diplomacy and understanding. Peace marches and international conferences became symbols of this new commitment to resolving conflicts through dialogue rather than violence. The hope was that, through cooperation and mutual respect, humanity could avoid the horrors of another global conflict. Section 8. The Atomic Age, a legacy of fear and progress. The most significant legacy of World War II was the dawn of the Atomic Age. The use of atomic bombs on Japan ushered in a new era of potential destruction, casting a long shadow over international relations. The development of nuclear weapons led to an arms race between the United States and the Soviet Union. Both countries amassed vast arsenals of nuclear weapons, creating a climate of fear and uncertainty. The world lived under the constant threat of nuclear annihilation, a stark reminder of the destructive power of human ingenuity. While the development of nuclear weapons had terrifying implications, it also led to advancements in science and technology. Nuclear energy, for example, held the promise of clean and efficient power.